Now, today's session. RCC has partnered with MindField Group to present this series to you in order to provide you with some best practices and benchmarking data on retail human resources. Today's session is going to discuss the importance of quality of care and help you to understand how it drives better business performance, engagement levels, and turnover. To tell you a little bit more about what you'll hear today, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Cameron Laker. Cameron co-founded MindField Group in 2005 with a focus on helping hourly employers improve the quality of their workforce. Cameron has helped to grow the organization to over 60 employees and focuses his time on vision, strategy, and client relations. His expertise lies in sales, marketing, competitive strategy, and technology. Cameron, thank you so much for joining us again today, and I'll pass it over to you now.
Thanks, Evan. I really appreciate that intro. So let me just hop into it. So for those of you obviously who took part in last week's webinar, thank you very much and welcome back. And to those of you last week, some of this talks and some of last week's content, but there is a lot of fresh information in here. And some from last week were kind of related to there was some questions on the attract piece. And obviously, if you're in the real space and you operate in either Quebec or Alberta, you probably got some issues with attracting. So let me just hop right into here. Just a quick recap of one second here. There we go. So a little bit we do. We help hourly employers hire the best people and help hourly workers land jobs they love, and that's really the core to our mission statement. And for those of you who missed last week, just a quick refresher, what we do is we provide talent acquisition solutions to hourly employers, and we define hourly employers from retailers even out to warehouses and call centers and restaurants and hotels and so forth. We really provide two core services, a outsourced recruitment solution and a candidate sourcing solution. And the data that I'm going to be sharing, which I shared last week and this week, the best practice and processes are really based on just our overall size. So this is taken from over 327,000 applications that we've received, either directly to us or on behalf of our customers in the last 12 months. We've hired over 10,000 Canadians, driven 1.5 million career site visitors, and we see about a 22% conversion rate on our career site. So in average is about 7 to 9. So this frames up the core of when we're going to share a lot of this data. This is where this data is coming from. So let's first into what's happening in the market. And some of you who are on the call here, we're going to pull up some of your stats. I don't know if this is information that we get from one of our partners. But off with, we thought we'd share with you a little bit around which retailers in Canada are doing the most job postings. And this is the top 25, starting with Shoppers Drug Mart and going down, and then 13 being Indigo Books, as you can see as it scales down. You can see the most active job posters in Canada, and Shoppers Drug Mart. Now, a little bit of this is taken from a tool called Want and Analytics. And Analytics is a business intelligence tool that aggregates job posting data all over the web. And this data is taken from July through to September, so the full 3 months there. And I thought this was important for a few things. Number one was there was a total of 43,000 retail jobs posted online in Canada between July and September. Almost north of 50% of those jobs came from these 25 employers. So what we're finding is, and you probably see this a lot, is you go to some of these larger job boards, you go to some of these sites, and you find that one or two retailers are extremely dominant on those sites. And sometimes it makes it difficult for some of the smaller companies to get good view visibility on their job postings. This is the sheer volume that exists in all the search results. But this gives you a bit of a handle on who in Canada, and so you may have some of your competitors on here, or many of you that call us, you're probably looking at your company here. But if you look at the perspective, this is the kind of volume that we're looking at, and we're seeing an increase across all the sectors on a quarterly basis right now, just because of the challenges that are sitting around attracting great talent. the regions, and what we also found is when we looked at the regions, and when you talk about competitiveness, now there's a couple things. One, which is that you've got more people in Toronto, obviously, and more people in Montreal than you would in, for example, Winnipeg. But key to understand here is where are most of these jobs existing. Now, no surprise that obviously Toronto and the GTA area is the number one reason, just because of sheer volume and the number of retailers and the number of stores out there. But then you start, looking at some of these other areas, and there's a fairly big drop-off. Get to Edmonton, and things really start to drop to a point where Regina's got 692 roles. Now, a little bit of information around this. We use this data, what we use this for is to understand where the opportunities are from a competitive advantage perspective, and I think you can look at it in the same fashion. So you look at Quebec, and you think over a 3-month period, there's only been 999 jobs or retail jobs posted online. Quick disclaimer, this does not include Craigslist or Kijiji, so I just make sure that these are actual true job boards. This does include classified sites. So when you do this, you can kind of give a handle on just how much content is out there for a job seeker. And particularly, if you look at these regions, now you're going to have some small communities you operate in, but at these regions and look at the volumes aren't overwhelming to a point that not possible to stand out on top of the crowd. And we're gonna show you a little bit about that right now. On the best practice around this, especially when you get into these different regions, there isn't one silver bullet. There isn't one job board or one site. And in fact, if you only use one national site or only one job board, you're going to be at a pretty massive disservice. And I'll show you exactly why we make that statement. So here's the list of the top job boards from top to bottom, left to right. And the number one, it does scrape corporate sites. So a little from a best practice perspective, when you look at the market, these are the job boards that are getting the most retail jobs in Canada over that period of time. Now, if you don't have a corporate site and you don't have a way to list jobs, when we talk about best practice, it is absolutely the foundation here that has to be in place, number one. Go as an aggregator. We're exploring that site, a little bit deeper right now to understand really how it's set up and what it does. But it's got a lot of volume on it. Workopolis, HRDC, Job in Quebec. We had a lot of conversation. Well, not a lot of conversation. I had a very specific question last week's webinar around what's happening in Quebec. And there's a couple of sites that really kind of popped up. Emploi Quebec is the provincial government site. This Nouveau site seems to be having quite a bit of French content. Workopolis is growing its French content. But this gives you a bit of a list on really where are the jobs, where are the retail jobs, and what sites are hosting the most of them. So this isn't necessarily regionally based, although you can see some of the niche job boards that are on here. Look at this, though. When you look at the total number of retail jobs, is 55,000. This list of boards basically is 90% of all postings in retail are going to this collection of 24 sites. So for some of them that you use, obviously it's good to understand how much penetration they've got, and different ones are stronger in different regions. But I felt it was key to share to those on the call, because you never really get this data from a central spot. You may talk to different vendors or different partners and get you on things. Workopolis is a company that we recently announced the partnership with, and their advancement and their growth in the retail space has been fantastic, and that's a big reason why you've been seeing them climb the ladder there, even beyond a site like HRDC, which is free. So that's information just on where these jobs are posted, and again, I think it's really key. The last webinar we spent a lot of time framing a conversation around what is the true cost and what does it cost to recruit, and what we're trying to do here is make a bit of a foundation for there is no one job board that's absolutely heads and tails above everything else. There is no one region that's getting way more content than the others. It's actually fairly spread out. And one thing that this does represent is the absolute critical nature of having a multi-channel sourcing strategy. And we're going to talk about that, the how-to strategy piece here towards the back half of this webinar. As we get into this and we establish there's a variety of options out there on where jobs should be getting distributed to. There's different levels of competition in each one of these regions. And what I want to sense of talking about is how do you get really good about driving good, consistent, quality applicant flow for your jobs in these different regions. So are you essentially attracting top talent, which is really why you're on the webinar here today. So when we look at this world of attracting, number one is that this idea or concept around having a localized sourcing strategy. We touched a little bit last webinar, but really to get into a little more depth is this localized approach is really leveraging of niche job boards. You know, when we look at an overall sourcing or advertising strategy, whether a company that's large or small, you need to think through, okay, what is my kind of national board I'm going to use? What's my coverage right across every province, across every community? And what are those key activities that get used in Saskatchewan, or those key activities that get used in Alberta? What we found, from a strategy perspective, is when you really get clear and leverage those niche job boards on an ongoing basis, you're going to really impact your candidate flow. What works in Calgary does not necessarily work in Edmonton, and vice versa in Vancouver for that matter, and in Toronto. In Vancouver, Craigslist is fantastic. In Edmonton, Kijiji is a fantastic job board, and it beats out Craigslist any day of the week. So localizing your sourcing strategy and the ability to obviously measure that is key. The second one is your EVP, or your employment value proposition. There's a consistency across retailers in Canada to really, I'm not talking about everybody here, but I'm talking about the bulk of retailers, particularly the ones that haven't really invested time and energy into this. There's a homogeneous view on why someone would come and work for your business. Growth opportunities, exciting environment, learn development. When you dig into it, though, you've really got to make sure that your employment value proposition is absolutely true, and you can deliver on that promise. One customer that we had, the core of their EVP was about grow into a management role, and the reality is when you actually looked at that brand promise, they had over 1,000 staff. They were promoting 5 to 10 people a year into a store management role. So to hang your entire employment value proposition statement on something that really only impacts just a small percentage of your workforce really is going to create a disconnect with your applicant. And when they come in, they're going to expect growth opportunities, and when they don't get them, they're going to leave. So I think it's really key beyond the localized sourcing strategy, really getting clear on what your employment value proposition is. And to me, this isn't about a slogan. About what is that brand promise and what makes you unique, and more importantly, that uniqueness should really clearly speak to the right type of people that you want to hire. Maybe on the call, have a business that's heavily based around a lifestyle, or you've got either some, the product or the clothes or what you sell is a lifetime with a certain type of person, and not being afraid to draw in this end and say, here's what we're all about, here's what we care about, and here's the type of people we want to come work for us. And if you don't fit this frame, this profile, that's okay. The marketing department does this all the time. They're really clear on who their target customer is and go after them. And I think the same thing can be said from a talent marketing and messaging perspective. So employer branding, right? So communicating your EVP is one, but employer branding is looking for opportunities to make sure you're in the right areas, and whether this is career areas, whether this is content, whether this is active on campuses, but overall consistency in that branding. So communicating your EVP and then making sure that it's a consistent experience with the candidate. So employer branding isn't just about a career site; it goes way, way deeper than this. So your brand is gonna be based on the experience that your candidate has with you, or your hire has with you. So really thinking through that story and that entire life cycle of an employee, and making sure that it's consistent not only pre-hire but post-hire. Only a career site. So what we're finding nowadays, and there's some interesting data here, and I shared a little bit of it last time, a third of traffic on Indeed and a third of the traffic on Simply Hire right now are two of the biggest aggregator job boards. And I should mention those aggregators weren't listed in here because they were removed from the list. There's about a third of their traffic that come from mobile phones. We'll go around mobile here in a second, but our view on things and our belief is that in particular this generation, or the hourly job seeker, within the next 24 months, will have an expectation to be able to apply to jobs strictly by using their mobile phone. Having to sit down and upload a resume and go through that process, I think, is going to be an expectation that's going to go away. So when I think about the Brain career site, it's not only is it a career site that's clean and simple to navigate, really easy to apply to, make sure that your EVP is clear. It's really simple when they click on a job posting to drive to that application process. But then we're starting to think through responsive design. And this is a marketing term, but when you talk about responsive design, it doesn't matter if someone's on a desktop, whether it's a 12-inch screen or a 27-inch screen, looking at you from their Android phone or their iPhone or iPad. The design is responsive so that your website actually goes and stretches and bends depending on what a user is looking at your site at. So, first, having mobile functionality, and I really do believe over the next, faster, it could be even the next 12 months, you have to see a high volume of job seekers trying to apply to your company via their mobile phones. It's going to be critical to make sure that you've got that strategy deployed. And I'm going to get into some questions on the mobile stuff as well, so if there's some questions on this towards the end here. The piece is simplifying the process, so quality and relevant traffic. So it's not just about getting more people to apply, but obviously quality people. And one of the most important things you can do to drive and improve quality of applicant is getting your message out to more distribution outlets, more job boards, more niche sites. This localized strategy really comes into play. Relevant traffic in the sense that that is very, very clear on what your brand message is, and when they read your job description and they end up on your website and they watch that career video, they really clearly they resonate with what you're trying to do because you feel like you're speaking directly to them. And the relevancy perspective, quality, if you think about a marketing funnel, so the more leads you get in the top of the funnel, the likelihood you're going to get quality at the bottom, and then the ones that are quality, having to make sure that your distribution strategies to get those leads in are relevant, that the message is clear, and when someone reads a job posting or reads an advertisement about you, it really does speak to them. Beyond mobile stuff, which I'll touch on again, making it really simple for applicants to apply. This is so critical, especially for those of you who are investing thousands of dollars per year into job boards. You invest a lot of money into getting that traffic and getting those eyeballs. You may even have staff in your business that's focused on posting these jobs. Think about the investment and the time investment on getting these jobs distributed to then have a missed opportunity on only having a 5% conversion rate on your career site, for example. If you had a 15% conversion rate, then you start to triple your ROI on the time and money spent. Optimization we spoke about, but really it's building an experience that can be fully managed by their own candidate experience. So is it clean? Is it simple? Is it a positive experience? These people are customers, and for those of you on the call that have very, very large organizations, you're processing hundreds of thousands of applicants per year. These people are all either current or potential customers, and the experience that they have as a candidate is absolutely going to impact their decision on whether or not they're going to be a consumer with you. So I think it's important to think through, for those of you on the phone, they're saying, well, we're going to get budget to build a mobile career site, or we're going to get budget to do this. I think it's important to really link those two pieces together, that the people that are investing time into applying to your company, you've got to give them a good experience as well, because at the end of the day, it's either going to help or hinder your overall brand as a retailer. So what we found with those two pieces, with those two sides, and you think about a localized strategy, and you think about making it really simple for individuals to apply and getting it out to multiple sources, what we're finding is conversion rates of 15 to 20%. And it's a very key metric for you to think about from a benchmark perspective on if you're best practice. If your site's really doing its job, you should be driving bare minimum 15% conversion. And if you are, that means you're probably driving out the right messages to a right localized strategy, and messaging is relevant to the right type of job seeker. Now, don't get me wrong, this is surefire to make sure you never get applicants that aren't a fit. But what it should do is start to increase your overall investment into the time spent and the advertising spend onto some of these paid job boards, or even the time that you're spending to post these jobs. So I encourage you, if you don't have something simple like a Google Analytics set up on your career site, your marketing department might already have this back end that they just haven't been shown to you. But what we found is that localized strategy, easy apply, and really a nice, cleanly blended experience can really drive the conversion rate, which is going to improve the quality of the applicants available for your jobs. So the screen piece. Now that we've got some ideas and some concepts and strategies on how to get more people applying to our jobs and more people being attracted to our brand and attracting the right ones, now we've got the problem in some markets where you get 100 applicants for a job, or even in some markets maybe you only get 5, but you need now a really good, consistent process to go and make the appropriate hires. So walk through some tips and suggestions on how you can help drive and improve the quality of hire, but making it easier for the store managers to consistently make great hires. So doing hire quality, and I'm going to talk about how we measure this as well in some detail, but when you look at it, there's 3 big components to the screening process. And what I mean by this is the initial component is really about what again, so this is from a candidate experience perspective, is a series of questions that they're going to answer when they apply online. And those really help you identify minimum requirements, the green flag candidates versus the red flag candidates. Allows you right away to start saving substantial time and money by knowing who, at the very least, meets the minimum requirements with either a check mark or a green flag or a red flag. And I would say that 99% of applicant tracking systems out there that are any kind of small business app, some kind of a tool already built there for you to go and help screen out that first wave. Next piece is implementing assessments. And this piece, if you look at the United States, and you look at large retailers in the United States, the option of this is very, very high. And in Canada, the option is so-so. I think many of you on the call likely have some kind of assessment tool that you use for a store manager, maybe you use for, that final candidate. So a lot of the time it's the costing on this. What's really key here is whenever you think about the assessment tool and you think about the time and effort that you're investing now and the potential ROI of lowering turnover by hiring better people on a consistent basis, is first off making sure we understand those key performance indicators, or importantly, the behaviors that drive the key performance indicators in the hiring process. So this can start with either a focus group or a profiling, or really getting clear on who are your best people and what do they have consistent. What consistent traits do they have? Now, there's many assessments on the market you can buy out of the box that have a standard approach. Our view on it is a lot of the time building a custom one based on data from your core performers and your top performers. But if you look at this, the first thing you need to do is really establish a benchmark. And it's interesting. We've done over the past 6 to 12 months dig into some of these initial validation studies, and what's amazing is you actually your bottom 20% or your bottom part of your staff, the metrics behind it are actually what you pay them plus 40% is what they're costing you every single shift or every single week. So it's almost a 50% increase in what you're paying is what they're actually costing you in your business. So many retailers, and I would debate that there's a single retailer in the world that doesn't have this problem to some degree, is understanding which percentage of your workforce is actually costing you money. And so when you think about an assessment tool, it has less to do about, hey, here's my A player, let's make sure I just hire A players. It actually has more to do with the concept of how do I completely stop this organization from hiring that bottom 20% that costs us money and impacts our culture. It is so key in doing a few things. One, predicting turnover, culture fit, and overall engagement. But on the assessment piece that's really, everyone talks about, okay, well, here's John. I know John at store 72. He kills it from a sales perspective. Or Tracy at store 105. She is amazing with customers. How to hire more Tracys? And I really think the question you need to be asking yourself is a question is very, very important. The question to answer is those people that are costing me money and those people that are impacting customer experience and driving customers out the door, when you think about implementing an assessment, that's where the starting point should be, is how do you stop those people from getting hired? And that right there, that exercise, and stopping those people from getting hired and make sure that candidates that are a fit get through, that'll have a bigger financial impact on your business than anything short term. Once you build a process and assessment that eliminates those people from getting hired, you're able to really then focus in on that top end talent. How do we top grade? How do we hire nothing but Johns and Tracys? So a little bit of perspective on this. I know a lot of the time when you think about assessments is replicating top performers. Our view is it's more of a phased approach where you first need to have an assessment tool that stops you from hiring the people that are impacting your business in a negative way. And to do that, you have to measure both top performers and bottom performers. And so philosophically, when you think about an assessment tool and you think about, okay, well, let's go take our top 10 people, let's go replicate them. If you just go take the top profile, you really don't understand that profile of your bottom performers. So something to think about as you go and start to think through and strategize either with assessment tools or future assessment tools is does this tool really stop me from hiring these really bad hires? And that's how you can get immediate ROI with a tool like that. And then finally, measuring success. So every person on this call has a way to measure the quality of hire, and performance can be measured, whether it's by sales numbers or customer service numbers or just flat out a performance view from that manager. So when you think about measuring success and you implement some of these screening tools, it's not just about set it and forget it. It's putting it in place and then really understanding if it works. And you on the call may be familiar with, you've maybe put an assessment tool in the past and you get a green, yellow, red ranking and you hire a bunch of green applicants. And if you have those green applicants, you feel good about it, but are they actually the right ones? Are they turning over? Are they leaving? Are they actually engaged in your business? So when you think about this from a holistic perspective, it's not just about, hey, how do we make this more efficient for us to make great hires and consistently hire more Johns and Tracys and eliminate our poor performers, but how to validate this on an ongoing basis. Many approaches on this, but one of the simplest things is every person that gets hired, how they're doing at 90 days. Are they performing? Are they performing at a high level, at a low level? Helping to tie it back to an overall quality of hire strategy to really determine, is your marketing working, and is your marketing tied to your screening process, and is that really driving the appropriate results? I.e., turnover going down, are people sticking around after 90 days? Is the overall subjective feedback from the manager very positive on the hires since you've implemented that process? That really, this is a long-term commitment. This isn't a tactic, but it's about really an overall philosophical approach to how you go and drive workforce quality. So some of the things that we've seen, and just for those of you who call, you may think assessment tools are maybe a huge roadblock, especially in some of these tough markets. What's remarkable since the assessment tools have been deployed and what we're seeing from our sample size, think about a 92% completion rate. That includes an assessment tool that goes from anywhere between 70 to 100 questions. And part of this is because I believe you can drive a great completion rate if the branding is clean and you get people attracted to your brand. And that process is, not necessarily say short, but it's easy and straightforward and communicated in a clean fashion. People will complete the assessment. The other to this is what you're going to find is if you put some basic systems in place for your stores, you start to save them a lot of time and effort on how much time they have to spend on every single job. And then finally, depending on who you are in a certain makeup, how exciting would it be for you to be able to go put together a strategy that's going to go drive a 10% reduction in turnover? And we believe the core of this is really what we talked about, is about really getting clean on what messages to the market, who do you want to go and hire, and really refining this, and then doing an assessment, not an assessment tool, but a quality of hire process, a check and balance to make sure that you are consistently hiring good people. And those two things combined, even in an elementary level way, can really start to impact turnover if you don't have a lot of systems in place. So in a candidate landscape, this is just, we always get eyes, and I can't see you guys, so I don't know what your reaction is going to be to this, but this is an insight into the 1.5 million visitors, or 1.2 career site views, in last year. So we week, this is when traffic is coming in. So again, we're using this off the 1.2 million career site views. The traffic. So it's peaking on Thursday. So it comes Tuesday, Wednesday, it grows, and then it starts to slow down throughout the week. So Saturdays and Sundays, this is a huge surprise to anybody, but we don't see a lot of traffic and a lot of eyeballs hitting the career sites on the weekends, deploying the strategies that we've talked about here. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are great days to be pushing out content. Just it seems to be the days that they're most active. So this is defined as, okay, so now that they're on your site, we know which days they're on their site. Now, what actually giving us their information? What's really interesting about it is it doesn't change. So there isn't a day, well, Thursday sticks out. If you look at this, it's building throughout the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They're checking out your site. They're looking at your information. They're making a decision on whether or not to apply. And then we're ultimately using, Wednesday, Thursday as the days to go apply. So the actual days that the conversions are going up, this is the percentage of people hit the site that then go and apply. We're seeing kind of that Wednesday, Thursday is the optimal time per week to make sure your content is available on the web. Also making sure that this is a great day to drive applicant flow in the middle of the week. Time, 2 p.m. Eastern. Out of all the times in the day, that's the time that we get the highest traffic. And from the highest conversion time, when they actually apply, is 3 p.m. So the highest traffic is at 2. They're checking your site out, they're looking at your information, and then they're deciding to apply an hour later. They may find something that's of interest and then go and get their resume together or put their information together and then apply an hour later. So middle of the day. Apply to, sorry, I should mention, it's not just Eastern time, that's actually 2 p.m., whether it's in Pacific or Eastern. So it's really 2 p.m. in general is the right time, and then 2 p.m. is optimal time for receiving applications. So important for you to understand if you've got projects or big hiring events, your highest conversion time and your most applicants coming in at 3 p.m., you've got central staff, then you want to make sure that they're heads down from 3 to 5 o'clock, process those applicants really, really quickly. It is a substantial increase at that 3 p.m. time, conversions throughout the day. So if people are applying to your company at 3, you want to make sure if they're great, you can jump on them right away that afternoon. These now, again, this is a makeup of our customers. So this isn't necessarily the entire country or the job seeker space. But we're seeing with the strategies we're deploying, and it's fairly consistent. The board work well, and we're based in Vancouver, so we've obviously got intimate knowledge of the local market, and our brand's a little more strong with the candidate market. But it's spread across the board. These are the cities right now that we're using as a core of this data. So I'm taken from 100,000 visitors from Edmonton, for example. So I don't know if this information is terribly relevant from a strategic perspective, but it gives you a little bit of framework on how we're generating this data. Device breakdown. This is growing at a very, very rapid pace. So if you look at the 8% on a laptop or a desktop, and then if you look at iPads and mobile phones equating to 12%. Last year it was 6% across all of our customers. Now it's doubled to 12, and there's no reason to believe that the number of visitors won't double to 24, 25% next year. So obviously that commitment, we're seeing this, and this is sample size that we've got. I don't think there's going to be much difference in your reality if you're posting your job out to multiple places. But 12% we've seen here, and we expect that to grow. And so your conversion rate on that is really key, because if now 25% of your traffic's coming from mobile phones, it's really important to think about how are we going to capitalize on those individuals and how we're going to capture their information when they first apply. So that kind of brings me to the end of the webinar, and I'm kind of right on that kind of 40-minute mark here, so we've got some time for questions. My hope is that there'll be some good, healthy discussion around mobile and career sites and regional questions. But with that being said, obviously, we're doing this because we love to educate, but we're also doing this because we love to help. I'm always happy to chat with you. For those of you on the call who are more than 1,000 employees, we talked a little bit last webinar about helping build out a good understanding of how much money you were spending, how much the cost was, and maybe identify some low-hanging fruit to improve our recruiting process. we're happy to do that. And if you go to mindfieldgroup.com/RCC webinar, I'll work with you to help establish that cost in that program. And if you're on the call that maybe you're running a store or have a smaller retailer, we've got an RCC job posting site. If you go to mindfieldgroup.com/RCC job posting, happy to work with you on a job that you're struggling with and to value add to help you fill that role. So thanks very much. I hope that was of value. I could have spent 3 hours talking about data, but I wanted to keep things on a fairly high level basis here. And next week is really to dig into how it is we go and really systematically improve the quality of hire. And we're gonna share some stats and talk about some of the behaviors that are most associated with turnover, and some things to think about when you think about your strategy on how far will people actually travel to stick around your business. What are some key strategies to drive down turnover in the 90 days? So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got lots of questions as well. And with that being said, Deb, I'll pass it back to you for any of the questions.
Great, very much, Cam. At the beginning, of the session, I said you can send in your questions through the chat box, which is on the lower right-hand side of the screen. But if you've got the page maximized, then you just have to go up to the legend at the very top and just press on the chat box to open it. So I have seen one question come through. They're asking what is if you have any suggestions for a best job board to use in Quebec.
We got that one last week, and to kind of, I mentioned I was going to speak about it in this session. There's obviously Emploi Quebec is the key government site out there. I think that works well. We're seeing the aggregators like Indeed and Simply Hired and this Nouveau site start to pick up and increase level traffic. Wow Jobs is also another good tool. The cold fact of Quebec is that there really isn't anything that's kind of a core site out there. But if you start with a baseline thinking about Emploi Quebec, the government site, and think through some of these more large aggregators like Indeed and Simply Hired, making sure the content's there. What we're finding in Quebec is you really have to take a community-by-community approach. So picking up the phone, calling that local employment center, picking up the phone and calling that, even newspapers in some of these smaller Quebec locations are key. I also find, and this is something that I assume is kind of the baseline, is if you do not have a French career site and an entire French experience for that applicant in Quebec, you're going to really, really struggle with driving conversions. The recommendations on where to go and source and post based on the assumption that you've got a fully bilingual site. Because if you do have a fully bilingual site, that is the absolute first and foremost that has to be in place. Otherwise, you're really going to impact your employment brand and candidate conversion ratios in that province.
Yeah. And here's another question for you. You've talked about, the people use when applying, and so the question is, why is having a mobile apply option important if most people are using desktop to apply?
Yeah, good question. So currently, you definitely have got most people applying by desktops. But if you're looking at the evolution of how these social sites are being used, right? If you're looking at your Facebook strategies and you're looking at Twitter strategies, and also too is as the technology gets better and better on career alerts or candidates signing up with you to hear about more opportunities, there's alerts to those outbound messages from you as an employer, not sitting in front of their computer. So critical to using things like resume databases and sourcing people and using tools like LinkedIn. People are getting LinkedIn messages based on using the LinkedIn app, right? And they're not necessarily going home and waiting to go log in LinkedIn on their desktop. So a few things is that number is going to grow. So that's a proactive strategy, I believe. That I would expect, and the numbers that we're forecasting is next year we'll see 25 to 30% of visitors coming from mobile phones, and be upwards of 50% based on some of the conversations with experts that we speak with by the end of 2014. So although it's a small percentage now, you prep for this because the number is going to start to really grow. And if you're doing your job as an employer and you're really getting proactive on trying to find great talent, I'm going to be messaging them and proactively messaging them. And the way you're going to do this is through a variety of tools that'll very likely the first time they're going to see that message is on their phone. So if you're properly messaging people and sourcing them, and they can interact with you right back there on their phone, we believe that's absolutely critical to any kind of a recruit strategy outside of, hey, just post on a job board. I mean, all job boards are moving to a mobile format.
Mm-hmm. I've got an interesting question here, and I hope I can hope you might be able to provide some insights. They're asking, what's the average length of time that you have to be in contact with a candidate from the date of their application before they've given up on applying to your company and moved on to another?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to frame that into two answers. Number one is active candidates. So these are the ones that are applying to you based on a job posting, for example. And you've got maybe more passive candidates or individuals that you're messaging who either joined your talent community or you're messaging resume database. Good applicants that are applying to you in hot regions will be gone in 48 hours. We know that that's a key number here for us, that if we get a great applicant that applies, we do have a conversation with them, get them in front of the manager within a 48-hour period. Otherwise, they're going to get picked up and hired by somebody else. So when you think about that, if you got a system where you get a bunch of applicants in and you review it once a week, even if you do the job of driving great quality, you have to have a system to get through these people quickly. So we view that great applicant that comes in through a job posting or advertising, actively looking for work. We wouldn't assume that we're the only place they apply to based on the market today, especially in a market like Alberta. You really got to get on them immediately. And in a perfect world, you build a process or a tool that or some kind of an indicator that allows you to quickly identify those people and get them engaged immediately, because you don't, someone else will. The passive candidates, the ones that are in running databases, the ones that are on LinkedIn, the ones that maybe previously applied to you or stated interest, you have more time with them. It's typically more of a selling exercise and a branding and marketing exercise with them. So you have to kind of put a frame on this. I mean, we look at it and you think through, for the retailers that are on this call, I mean, everyone has got to focus in on where are they getting, succession planning, in particular if you're growing aggressively. So where are these store managers? And because everybody knows that great ASM and that great store manager is not applying to you right now via a job board. You may get lucky once in a while and you get a great applicant. But what you need to do is think through, how do you build that pipeline in advance? And those types of people who you initially engage, you could have them engaged for 2 years with your brand to then finally convince them to come work for you. Versus some, you just catch at the right time and they get sold and excited about a better opportunity. So that strategy will vary depending on the types of roles and the region you're operating in.
Mm-hmm. Who's wondering, what are your thoughts on aggregate sites, and is it worth it to be branded on them?
Yeah, the ad sites right now, the two big ones that are obviously globally really growing is Indeed and Simply Hired. Indeed, both of them are growing at leaps and bounds right now, and I think that years down the road from now that they will be the end-all be-all from a job board perspective, beyond LinkedIn, obviously. But from a client perspective, we're the aggregators. A couple reasons. Right now, they're free, right? So everybody loves free. But we also find that the pay-per-click advertising can be extremely effective. But think about it, it has to be done in a very strategic fashion. So we know that Indeed and we know that Simply Hired drives great traffic. I will say this, those sites, although they drive a lot of traffic, you'll typically see a lower conversion rate. And I think the reason why is there's just a bigger inventory of jobs for a job seeker to look at. They can click on a job, click on your site. Is it easy to apply? Do they get attracted to it? If not, they can click back and there's yet another job there that's a similar job, at least a job seeker's view. So, I'll answer to this, but yes, the aggregators have got a lot of value, and we actively use the pay-per-click platform. It has to be used in a strategic sense. Most of the reps that work for those companies will help you do that effectively, but it's really key for you to think through how you're going to spend this money and also measure the success of it, because you could very easily start spending $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month on pay-per-click advertising and Indeed, but if you're not making the appropriate number of hires from that source, you're going to really struggle with that investment. But the PPC stuff, pay-per-click advertising, is growing in effectiveness, and the job seeker market is really starting to adopt it.
And so somebody else has asked, if you're implementing an assessment tool, do you have any suggestions for a larger retailer who's recruiting for multiple positions, like both sales advisors and managers?
Suggestions on which ones?
On when implementing the assessment tool.
Yeah. So a couple things. I mean, you can. I can kind of speak to that on our philosophy on this. We believe that you should be able to create an assessment tool that measures a candidate for multiple roles. So I think that needs to be a prerequisite here. And what you can do, that is what we find, is there's tons of people that apply to a sales associate job, but if you're measuring them both in the sales associate, and maybe they'd be a way better cashier. And so we find that drives just a wow experience with our candidates, because they get, I thought about this, I would be great there, and we data to back up the reasons for why they'd be great there. So I think we've got a tool that can do a few things. One, consistently look for people that have the culture fit behaviors that are associated with your company or key, and then having it within that tool, the ability to evaluate a candidate across multiple different positions. We've built, our assessment tool is built specifically to go and do that in a customized fashion, because we find that you can't just put generic assessment in place, especially if you've got some complexity in your roles. It's just, there's too much of a risk there to consistently make bad hires. A recommendation is to go look at the market and what's available, and make sure that when an applicant applies, they're being evaluated on multiple roles versus different assessments for different positions. It's very costly that way too. Question or not, but if whoever asked that, if you want to ask a follow-up question, I'm happy to dig into that with you. And on a side note, I'm happy to have that conversation offline with you as well.
There's a bit of a follow-up to the Quebec job board question, which is if you have any recommendations for BC and Alberta.
Yeah.
They're both difficult markets to hire in as well.
Part of our strategy is consistently throwing a lot of stuff against the wall and evaluating over a longer term what sticks. And when we look at BC and Alberta, I think, in particular for companies that are maybe growing out west or ones that don't have a really strong brand, I mean, I think that there's an opportunity to go look at some of the regional boards are quite impactful. The boards, Kijiji and Craigslist are quite good. This isn't a surprise to anybody on the phone. There is no real silver bullet there. We're finding, especially with just how job seekers are getting more educated and mobile phone savvy and so forth, it has more to do with the story that you tell. And so let me explain this. Job seekers available right now, and people talk about the difficulties in Alberta, and the stark reality is that people are making great hires in Alberta. So I guess when I look at the struggles that companies have in some of these regions, I'd first have a really good deep dive, and am I communicating my message properly? Because I do want to say there's great people that are looking for work, and there's great people looking for minimum wage work. So the first thing I would do is have a really good solid look at my employment brand strategy and my messaging, and is that good and is it strong? And then from there, I would go look at some of the regional job boards. There's some paid ones like BC Jobs and so forth. There's some regional ones such as, I think Job Shop does a really good job in some key regions in Alberta, and that's another one of our job board partners. Would look at more localized strategies, in particular in Alberta. And I think there's all kinds of agencies and groups that you can work with. New Canadians is a key recruitment strategy there. But, to be honest, when we look at those two markets, we really do believe there's ample applicants and tons of great people available. Everyone's got the system set up to capitalize on this, and sometimes investing in a job board may be wasting money if you don't have the right infrastructure or the right message on the back end to actually hook these guys to apply to you. I don't really know if I answer that specifically, but that's kind of my view on it from a Western Canada perspective.
So I know that last week you gave us a lot of information about average turnover rates, and I see a question here as we're talking about Alberta. Somebody's asked if you provide an average turnover rates in Calgary or even Alberta, or if you could even maybe speak to the differences in the turnover rates, sales associates in West Canada versus Eastern Canada. perhaps?
Great question. I do not have the answer in front of me right now, but I will have some more context for that answer for next week. That's a great question, and I think obviously there's an increase in turnover in some of these tougher regions, but I don't want to just pull numbers out of the air here. So let me do some research on that, and thank you for answering that question. And we're going to dig into some more specifics of that based on just customer data and aggregate data in those markets.
Okay, and we'll take a last question here. If anybody's got any last-minute ones, then we can send those through. The last one I see is, what about average starting wage for hourly associates? I imagine that will probably vary from region to region, but do you have any insights?
Absolutely, we have insight, but totally unprepared for that question. That's a great question. I think we are seeing a difference in pay depending on the sector, right? So whether if you're grocery or apparel or consumer goods, electronics, or if you're commission or non-commission, I mean, it varies pretty heavily. Can individual, for that specific question, can you give me insight into what sector you're looking for? I can maybe help provide better insight there.
Well,
so maybe you could just.
They're looking for Alberta, non-commission. Mm-hmm.
We're getting warmer here. What's that? Is it apparel, like consumer goods, home?
I do see that they've given me that, but do you have any insights about food service, not restaurant?
Food service, not restaurant. Okay, absolutely. Let me dig into that for next week as well. So food service, not restaurant, and turnover. I got it. Great. Those are some great specific questions, and I think that will let us dig into this and do some homework for that for next week, and hopefully give that info, and hopefully everyone on the call maybe some better benchmarks. In particular, my guess is there's a lot of consistency around Alberta, so maybe we can dig in and look at the Alberta data so that people can understand and kind of gauge how they're doing in comparison.
Sure. Thank you very much. I also saw a couple of people asking questions about whether or not we'll be able to provide a hard copy of the presentation or also the recording. So I will be sending that out to everyone as well. And I think that seems to be it for the questions for now. So if you think of any others, feel free to send those in to the customer service team here at RCC, and we can forward them along to Cam. So our email address is customerservice@retailcouncil.org, and I'll be sure to get those all into the right hands. And, other than that, Cam, I'd just like to say thank you for the presentation. I think it was really, really informative. I hope everybody's found it to be very valuable. And as you exit the session, we're going to have a survey for you. You could just take a couple of minutes to provide us with some feedback on the presentation. And I hope that you'll be able to join us for next week when we talk about improving the quality of hire. Cam, thanks so much.
Hey.
Thanks everyone for joining us. You all have a nice day.